on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
And there's lots more to come between now and 9 o'clock. We're going to be speaking to a pair of comedians who've had gigs cancelled, and we're going to get some more questions from this wonderful studio audience. But let's get the news headlines first from Aaron Armstrong.
Very good evening to you. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Tax cuts may be unlikely in this week's budget, with the Chancellor promising a prudent spending plan. The Office for Budget Responsibility has predicted there's around £2 billion less to spend than previously thought. That's after Britain was confirmed to have slipped into recession at the end of last year. Speaking to GB News earlier, Jeremy Hunt said his budget will deliver better value for taxpayers.
It is wrong to say that we should be putting more money into the public sector.
So you want fewer civil servants to be more productive?
Correct.
You want fewer people to do more?
I think we've got to stop always looking at the inputs and always saying that the way to get better public services is to spend more, and actually ask if we could be more efficient.
Now, those who preach hate could be blocked from entering Britain. It understood that reports claim the government is planning to identify and add dangerous extremists to a visa warning list. They would be automatically refused entry to the UK. More on that story a little later. Rail fares in England and Wales have risen by almost 5%. That's an increase above the rate of inflation. And that's despite some of the highest numbers of train cancellations for a decade amid strikes, bad weather and faulty infrastructure. Public transport campaigners say passengers are being punished by the increases, which could add hundreds of pounds to annual travel costs for some commuters. Now, two women have been charged after pouring porridge and jam on a bust of Queen Victoria at a Scottish art museum. Saoirse Ní Martin and Hannah Taylor also spray-painted an expletive on the plinth at the Kelvin Grove Gallery and Museum. We'll come to that in a moment. The picture you're looking at regards the almost 5% rise in travel costs that have come into effect in the UK today. As I mentioned, an increase above the rate of inflation. Let's hear from some commuters who could have hundreds of pounds added to their annual costs.
I would be quite happy for the rail fares to go up if they invested the profits in the infrastructure so that the rail network and the rolling carriage was consistently good standard and that the trains ran on time.
It's a bit much. That's just sort of like come out the blue. That took me off key there.
Nothing's really changed on the trains, so it's not really fair to raise the prices. I think if there's a change and more trains are put on and stuff like that, maybe then, but not right now.
Let's get you up to date with those two women who've been charged for vandalising a bust of Queen Victoria at a Scottish art museum. Saoirse Ní Martin and Hannah Taylor spray-painted an expletive on the plinth as well at the gallery in Glasgow. Now, the pair are from the campaign group This Is Rigged. They reportedly glued themselves to the bust. The group says it carried out the vandalism to protest against increasing food insecurity. Donald Trump could take another step towards a November election rematch with Joe Biden later. Voting's underway in Washington, D.C., with Mr Trump hoping to continue his clean sweep of states in the race to become the Republican Party's presidential candidate. He's now won 6 states after victories in Missouri, Michigan and Idaho last night. Now, he made a number of false claims at campaign events, including allegations that Joe Biden is smuggling people across the border. And he once again confused the current president with Barack Obama. Much more in all of our stories is available on our GB News alerts. You can scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Free Speech Nation.
Free Speech Nation. So let's get some more questions from this lovely studio audience. We've got a question from Zach. Hello, Zach.
Hi. Does the phrase trans woman, in other words, males, pass BBC impartiality guidelines?
Yeah, so I don't know if you saw this week. The Today presenter Justin Webb had a complaint upheld against him by the BBC because he'd said trans women are males, and a listener complained and said that this was a breach of the impartiality rules. So let me get this straight. On the BBC, you're not allowed to state biological facts now. That's the deal, right?
That's the way it sounds.
Right.
It's another fantastic example of the BBC being absolutely in step with the nation's opinions.
Yeah, clearly. But, I mean, what do you make... I mean, the BBC should be able to say that this is a legitimate thing for him to say. And if they're saying this is about impartiality, well, this sounds like they're very much taking a particular side in the culture war.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it. They can't say... They can say we don't want this... They could have a policy, couldn't they, that we don't believe in this and we won't have anybody in our staff saying it. But they can't say it's about impartiality.
No. I know you're a fan of the BBC, Lewis. What do you want to say about this?
Well, if someone had said that a trans woman is a woman...
Yeah.
Right?
They would have been fine with that, yes.
That would be fine. So it is...
So it's double standards, right? If you're allowed to say that, why aren't you allowed to say a trans woman is a man?
It's a double standard. And the fact is that the BBC is the state propaganda network and has no place in a democratic country.
You're always so extreme, Lewis. I don't agree with that.
Yeah,
I think
because you are BBC quality, and someday you'll have your own show on the BBC.
Oh, I see.
Which I totally respect.
So I'm just protecting my own interests by being...
Yes, I have no chance of ever going on the BBC, so I can screw those people as much as I want to.
You might end up on the BBC, but not for the reason that you'll think. I think maybe in a news report with a blanket over your head going into a van. All right, let's get a question now from Tim. Where's Tim? Hi, Tim. Hi.
Evening. Is it a microaggression to give jobs to qualified people?
Yeah, this is a claim that's being made by some of Britain's top universities, that if you say that the most qualified person should get a job, that's a microaggression. This is coming from the Russell Group of universities.
Absolutely. I mean, look, as a woman, you know, I don't want the right person getting the job. I want DEI. No, I'm kidding.
Right.
No, this really offends me. I hate DEI. I think it undoes all the good work of people in the protected, looked-after groups.
But also, how does it look after you if they're saying being good at the job doesn't matter anymore? What does matter then? Just ticking various other boxes?
That's what you're left to think, isn't it? And that's why, if you do get the job and you happen to be the best person for the job and you happen to be in a box, now you don't get the credit for it because everybody thinks you got there because you ticked a box.
You see, now I'm worried that the only reason I got this job is ticking a box, right?
I didn't want to say, Andrew.
Well, you know, maybe you're ticking a few boxes, not the ones that we would expect or desire, even.
This is it's a good question. If a university basically, they're not really asking. This term is just, I don't know how to explain it. You know, you're good with the words. Yeah. But it's about seeing who's on our side and who isn't on our side.
So it's a test.
It's a test.
Right.
And what they're saying is we don't want people who think what that means. We want people who think the other thing, right?
Yes.
Okay? And if it's a university, a private university, they should be allowed to decide who they want to have. Why are we involved in a university?
Well, it's not a private university, that's why.
Well,
this is the Russell Group of universities. These are universities that anyone can apply to.
Right.
And you would have thought that meritocracy would apply.
Are they all owned by the state? Are they all getting money from the state? If they're getting money from the state, then we have an interest in it.
Yeah.
But what we should do is we should say, you know what, we're not giving them money and they can do whatever they want to do. If you want to have a university that supports that kind of ideology, which is...
That's all of them, Lewis.
Yes.
This is the problem, isn't it, Cressida? It's basically all of them at the moment. And so we have to now set up new universities, like they're doing in the University of Austin in Texas.
Yes, and Buckingham, they've got their new what's it called? Studies in Woke or something like that.
Yeah, Eric Kaufman's running that, yeah.
Good plug, Cress. So there's green shoots, isn't there? But on the whole, this stuff is everywhere.
OK, we're going to move on now. What we want to discuss now is the latest comedian to have a show cancelled. Now, normally, of course, I would oppose all such cancellations on free speech grounds. But to be honest, this comedian is kind of washed up. His act is kind of shambolic. It's not very funny. And I think this time they may have got it right. So let's have a look.
That's all these women who you call trans women. That's all these women want. Is someone to go up to them and say, hey, you're beautiful. You're a beautiful That's all men want.
OK, so Lewis Schaefer there, who... Now, Lewis, you're going to have to tell us this story. You've effectively had a gig pulled.
I've had lots of gigs pulled.
You have?
But this is the first one that was so obviously pulled.
And it was pulled because they said you were, what, homophobic and transphobic?
That little clip didn't give the... Lewis Schaefer's a brilliant stand-up comedian. I know you might not know it here, but he's one of the best stand-up... And what I was saying in this little skit that I do, which is that men are not told we're beautiful, we're rarely told we're beautiful, and we just want to be told we're beautiful, and that some men are willing to become women in order to get a little love directed their way. That's how bad it is for men.
I understand, Lewis, that the clip doesn't do it justice. You have to watch the full set. But the point is, it was that clip that got these people to cancel your gig.
Which is, I'm not going to mention who it was. I'm not going to mention the pub, and I'm not going because we were doing a benefit for. I'm not going to mention who we were doing a benefit for.
I'm glad you're full of the detail.
Yeah, no, because I don't need to. But basically, they saw this and they said, Lewis Schaefer, based on this, doesn't fit in their pub, which was my local, and it's the one that I go to quite. We've done dozens of shows.
OK, but this is... Cressida, can I ask you about this? You're a stand-up comedian. You know, the idea that a venue, a promoter, would see a clip that you've done online or a tweet that you've done and say, actually, your type of humour is offensive to us. Isn't this a bit odd? Coming from...
no, it's commonplace now, isn't it? I don't think it's right. I don't think it's appropriate. I mean, I'm not trying to defend Lewis's act, obviously.
No,
arguably,
it's appalling, yeah.
But there should be space for all the appalling acts. I mean, that's one of the great things about the arts, isn't it?
Well, it's interesting that this happened on this day, Lewis, because another comedian lost a gig on the very same day, and that's Scott Capurro, who is often on GBNews as well. He had a show cancelled in Dublin, and he's now being branded a child-killing Zionist. Let's have a look at what he posted just prior to the cancelled gig.
So tonight, I've been asked to not talk about, Palestine and the Middle East because the Irish are so on the side of Palestine because it's a victim culture thing. But, until they're told that Hamas is illegitimate and this war that they've created is going to be won by one side and one side only, get used to it, I don't think they know. So see you at the Laughter Lounge and see what's going to happen.
And Scott can join us down the line. Good evening, Scott.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us. So you put out that clip. It was just a little joke about what you were going to be talking about at the club. And then what happened?
That image of me looks horrible. I look dead. The club owner called. I was just doing a little social media. I'm obviously bad at it. Banter. Excited about the show that night. And the Friday night show the night before in Dublin had gone very well. But I'd been told to kind of lay off the Palestinian material. I thought, well, that's like a bone to a dog. I can't resist it. And then I was just chatting on Twitter, and the club owner who'd seen that video and one other where I criticized the bus called me in the accommodation where we were staying and fired me and had already replaced me before the conversation even happened. He sounded like he wanted to crawl through the phone and throttle me. He was so angry. But he started to yell at me that I didn't understand Irish politics and how similar it was to what was going on in Palestine. I said, as a Jew, I have to tell you, that's quite offensive. And he said, you know nothing about Belfast. I said, well, I'm in Dublin. He said, they're the same. And I'm like, well, you might want to learn. Anyway, he was kind of off on a tangent and disagreed with what I was talking about in a Twitter feed, so he canned me. I've known him for years. I've been working at that club for a very long time. I was really shocked.
But
it's
Scott,
a lovely
the thing
room, and I won't downplay the quality of the room.
I've seen your act many times, and sometimes you take the contrary position on stage. Sometimes I don't think the audience really knows what you think about anything because you often just like to needle them. So why would anyone... And people know what they're getting into when they go and see one of your shows, for goodness sake. So why would this promoter suddenly say, that's the red line, that's the thing that we're going to have to cancel your booking for?
Because Hamas is popular in Ireland, and the Irish have a great affinity for the Palestinians. They think they understand the problem, but they don't. And they want to, I think, stick it to Americans and the British in the only way they know how, and that is to side with Palestine in this issue.
Yeah, but this is comedy. That's what I don't understand about this. We're not talking about a political dispute. You weren't going to give a political speech. You were going to tell jokes. That's what I don't get about this.
That's what I don't get either. I mean, I was going to do what I always do. And I said to this guy, look, I'm always contrarian. You know that I'm confrontational. This is how I am. But I'm telling you, it's such a huge issue in Ireland. It's such a thing. the abuse I've had online about this. I mean, a lot of people have joined in and said, we like your act. A lot of the audience who was there enjoyed the evening. I did 2 shows on the Saturday at a different club. I found other shows. They were great too. But there is a huge amount of the Irish population who just will not hear of it. They have decided what's going on in the Middle East, and they won't even hear jokes. They have no time for it. They're incredibly woke about the subject, and they don't want to discuss it at all.
But it's not just an Irish thing, though, Scott. As you know, our Comedy Unleashed show last year in Edinburgh with Graham Linehan was cancelled by 2 venues. He ended up having to perform on a platform outside the Scottish Parliament. We've had Jerry Sadowitz's show pulled, Roy Chubby Brown's show pulled. We had Nohan on this show. He had a show pulled. Mary Burke's had a show pulled. Andrew Lawrence, Alistair Williams. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. There are comedians who are having all their shows pulled because promoters are worried about people being offended. Well, I thought comedy was sometimes about pushing boundaries.
He was worried about what I might say. That's what scares me. I mean, I was likely to do the same set I'd done the night before, which had worked. But he was worried about what I might express, what might come out of my mouth. The thing is also, you know, again, they know what I do and they've brought me over many times. And he hadn't asked me my politics in any part of the conversation. And you're right, people generally don't know. I like to sort of mince about and play both sides. That's the joy of the comedy for me. And that would have been the fun of it that night too. And again, the audience the night before that I spoke to afterwards seemed to enjoy themselves. It was in his head, his mom, but it's his club and he can do what he wants, you know? We'll see if I get paid, who knows?
I've seen a lot of the abuse you're getting, but you're winding them up even more by responding, which I'm very much enjoying. You seem to be enjoying
no wonder
it.
Sinead O'Connor offed herself. Who needs this kind of garbage, you know? I mean, poor Oscar Wilde. You would have never had an act now. They don't want to hear any of it, you know?
Okay, well, Scott, keep needling them. I'm sure you will. Thanks so much for joining me.
Bye.
Going to come back to you, Lewis. Scott's a controversial comic, isn't he?
Well, all comedy is controversial. I mean, the problem with Scott is he has a lot of jokes, and he's funny, and sometimes those jokes are a little bit too true. Here's my point. My point is, we are in difficult times, and there's no such thing as go to a comedy club and see comedy. It's not as simple as that anymore. Now they have to know. People are afraid to hear the things, and let them be afraid. What's the problem is the rudeness of it all. Like for Scott to be the guy to call him the day before, and not even to give Scott a chance to try to. But every single.
Is it just you Americans won't shut up? I mean, there's an element to that, isn't there? Well, it's the 2 of you, isn't it? They've gone after you now. But the thing is that I think it's very odd. You and Scott, and I have to say, are both brilliant comedians, and I do think that. So, you know, I normally say you're bad, but you are brilliant. And I think you're both known on the circuit as being just, you know, veterans of the people who are very much admired within the industry. And you're not safe anymore, right? That's what this culture has created.
I'm not safe. I don't think I was ever safe. I don't think any comedian is safe. And this is what we go. We go and do these shows. We go up on stage. The people are not automatically going to like me. They're not going to like Scott. They're not going to like anybody.
No, but you know what's so sad is that occasionally quite often, people are going to be absolutely thrilled because they don't get to see the Scott Capurro thing and the Lewis Schaefer thing on telly, basically, is where I'm going with this.
Yes.
And telly. As you mentioned earlier, you may not be on the BBC anytime soon, Lewis. And it's, you know, it's horrible because people don't get a chance to see these really outrageous comics, which, you know, that's the exciting thing about live comedy.
Well, exactly.
It's supposed to test you, and you don't have to go.
But after this thing cools down, people are going to say, we want to see this again. Right now, we're in a super sensitive thing. The thing that bothers me about all this is that these people who are super sensitive are totally rude by denying the audience the chance to make up their own mind.
Right, and the audience is such a good judge, because if you're in a club and you say something inappropriate, stone dead silence, that's a really powerful bit of feedback. The audience is the jury, right? I mean...
So isn't the solution, if people don't want to go and see Scott or they don't want to go and see Lewis, is not buy a ticket to see Scott or Lewis? That sort of solves the problem,
Well, that does solve the problem. Or I would say go and, you know... I guess you're right, don't go in the first place.
Rather than get the show cancelled.
You could go and not enjoy it.
You're right. I mean, that's always possible, absolutely. But anyway, Lewis, when can people actually see you perform? When are you doing stand-up?
Well, we're rescheduling this thing.
Right.
Monday.
OK. Lewis there with the details. As usual, you're going to have to Google it yourself. I'm sorry about that. But anyway, next on Free Speech Nation, the documentary Christspiracy has its world premiere in London this week. It promises to reveal a cover-up which has lasted for 2,000 years. One of the directors will be here in the studio to tell us all about it.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Meanwhile, we've got Prince William getting on with being a real royal, or is he? I mean, this business about being ambassadorial in the Middle East, about the Gaza situation, about the Israeli situation, about trying to be friends with everyone, this is sensitive ground.
It's very demanding, I think. It must be one of the most difficult things he's ever done. He has been to Israel before and the Middle East. He was the first of the royals who went there, and he spoke to the leaders of both in Israel and on the West Bank.
Yeah.
And he managed it beautifully. He managed to carve a very sort of delicate path. I think as well, he doesn't want to cut ribbons. He doesn't want to do the ordinary things, to go round and see people and do it unless he really cares about it. This is people who are homeless. These are people who are in a war. I think he wants to go very, very high up, not for arrogance.
Make a difference in the world.
But to help, and to try and smooth things
Angela,
over.
I might be way off the mark here, but he did not, to me, look a happy man at BAFTAs on Sunday night. There was just
lonely, for sure.
Yeah, there was just something about his face that looked like I didn't want to be here.
It did. He did look lonely, but I also thought he made a huge effort so that everyone would enjoy it. He didn't want to pass it on. He doesn't use his personal feelings publicly, whereas Harry, you can tell a mile off what Harry's thinking. So he's done very well for that. And I think because he's been their president since 2010, he didn't want to let them down. Very nice of him. But he's obviously very worried about her. And he's got a lot of pressure there. I mean, he's a man with massive pressure for his father, for his wife, making sure the children are all right. And now he's taken on the Middle East, you know.
From 10 a.m. every Saturday, we want to make you think and we want to make you laugh.
So we will give you all the top stories.
Now we start with a story that has shocked the nation this week.
But we're also going to make it light and fun and bring some entertainment in to make your Saturday morning nice and restful.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. A new documentary film gets its premiere in London this week, and Christspiracy claims to uncover a 2,000-year-old cover-up regarding how the teachings of the Bible and other religious books have been doctored over the years to the benefit of the farming and animal products industry. While making the movie, acclaimed filmmakers Kip Anderson and Cameron Waters found themselves stalked for 4 months and then had their camera equipment and memory cards stolen. Let's take a quick look at a trailer for the film.
Is there any threat or danger making a film like this?
Yeah, you just wait and see. You just wait and see. They will stop at nothing to keep this truth from getting out.
Is there a spiritual way to kill an animal? I'll put it this way. How would Jesus kill an animal?
Is there a peaceful way to kill an animal?
I think we need to wrap things up.
Looks very intriguing, doesn't it? I've got the co-director, Cameron Waters, with me now. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, You've had huge success with your previous films, which were on Netflix. You ran into a few problems when it came to Christspiracy, didn't you?
Yeah, exactly. When we got to the moment where we presented our first edit, there was a number of things that were a little bit on the edgy side that it created a conversation. Hey, some of these things we might want to pull back. And Kip, my co-director, and I had a really tough conversation, and we decided that we had to go the renegade route and essentially buy our rights back for the film and release the film on our own. We have a lot of respect for Netflix still. It was an amicable thing, but we knew that we needed to tell the story the way that it needed to be told.
So effectively, people won't be able to watch this on Netflix, they'll be able to watch it through other channels, other ways, and that gave you the artistic freedom that you needed for this thing.
Exactly, and in fact, what we're doing right now that we would have never been able to do if we had released it on Netflix is we're doing a theater premiere. So that's why I've come across the pond over here to actually premiere the film on March 20th. One night only, it's going to be in theaters in the UK here.
Very exciting. Now, I don't want to reveal too much about the film. What can you tell us about what's going on here? Because it's an old mystery that you're attempting to solve.
Right, right. Yeah, it's a 2,000-year cover-up. And what I would say, you know, to you, Andrew, or anyone who watches this program, Free Speech Nation, the name of it is that the speech of Jesus Christ himself has been suppressed and altered over the last 2,000 years. One key statement coming up on Palm Sunday as we're going into Holy Week, there was something that was said in the temple. We all know it as the Den of Thieves, correct? Jesus called it the Den of Thieves. There was something else that was said. I can't give away what it is on this program here right now. You have to go see it in the theater, but it's much worse and it's much more condemning than what he actually said.
Because
what we think.
Well, because what you see in that trailer is various religious figures balking a little bit at some of the questioning. And you did make an effort to go and speak to all sorts of religious figures, didn't you?
We did. So we came over to Oxford here and talked to some of the top theologians. But beyond Christianity, we talked to experts in Judaism, Buddhism, Islam. We went across the board, but especially in Christianity, the through line of the film, we've got Oxford professors, biblical archaeologists, professors of biblical hermeneutics that are confirming these findings.
And this is to do with the slaughter of animals and the treatment of animals. Can you give us any more detail, or should we leave that for people to see the film?
Well, yeah, I mean, just backing up for my story, I'm a born-again Christian. I was baptized. I was a gospel musician and wrote gospel music for Sony Records, but I started to ask these questions when I learned that 90 billion animals are killed every single year, farm animals on the land. If you include the fish, we're talking trillions every single year. 99% of that is factory farming. And we all know, I think, and agree that factory farming conditions are some of the most horrific around the world. It's essentially modern-day slavery for these animals. And as a child, I grew up, I have a bracelet that I wear. What would Jesus do? It's popular in America, a question that we ask ourselves, what would Jesus do when it comes to moral and ethical dilemmas? And for me, this felt like a huge one. It felt like one of the biggest, and I had to find out what was the answer. Is there a better way that we can do this as humanity? Is
there a sense in which there are some people who would rather you didn't explore these issues? Because you mentioned, or we know that you were stalked during the process. You had equipment stolen. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, so actually Kip was in San Francisco at the time, my co-director. He had his entire place ransacked. He filed a police report. 4 days later, I had my van. I was living out of my van at the time. That's for the last 7 years to be able to make this film that I've dedicated my life and my blood, sweat, and tears to. I had to live out of a van to make it happen. My van was ransacked when we were out filming. We came back and we had footage from Israel that we had filmed and everything, and it was gone. It was taken with the camera equipment, yeah.
Wow. Well, you've made other films, Cowspiracy and Seaspiracy. What is it that attracts you to certain topics to address in this kind of documentary format?
Right. Well, you know, Kip, my co-director, he was the one that made Cowspiracy and What the Hell, and then I was a part of Seaspiracy because I was making this. But what attracted me personally is, like I said, I came from a Judeo-Christian background, and I've been devoted to God my whole life, and you know, I see animals as God's creatures, and when I learned and started to understand the kind of atrocities that are happening in these slaughterhouses around the world, the different types of methods, a lot of suffering, it definitely was something that weighed heavy on my heart. And as you see in the trailer, it led up to the moment of me actually meeting Kip, because it was so hard for me to ask these questions to my own peers in church. When I asked them a question, is there a spiritual or ethical way to kill an animal? Or let me be more blunt, how would Jesus kill an animal? They kind of would tighten up. It's an uncomfortable conversation to have, but I really wanted to find the right way. As a good God-fearing Christian, I wanted to know, is there a right way to do this? And so that led me up to the moment of meeting Kip and deciding to make this film together to find out if there is a way.
And some of the clips look a little bit uncomfortable with some of the individuals that you're talking to. I mean, when you approach that kind of interview, do you give the interviewee preparation? Do you say, these are the kind of things we're going to talk about? Or are you trying to get that kind of legitimate reaction in the moment?
Right. Well, yeah, some of the interviews that end up uncomfortable, I mean, we go into it really wanting to learn. As we always say, this film is all about asking questions. It's not about coming with any answers. It's not about trying to make anyone uncomfortable. It's just, by nature, our society has put a wall around this conversation. Literally, the slaughterhouse doesn't have, they say if slaughterhouse had glass walls, everybody would stop eating animals. And it's true, because this is something that no one talks about. So it's like the big elephant in the room, right? So in a sense, when certain people are pressed on certain questions, yeah, it becomes uncomfortable.
Do you consider yourself a kind of activist, just using this as your medium?
I don't know. Do you think I'm an activist? What do you?
Well, no, I wouldn't want to put words into your mouth.
Yeah,
but, it feels like you're trying to get a message out there. It feels like you want to affect some kind of change.
Yeah, well, no, to me, again, coming back from my heritage, I'm trying to get the message of Christ out there. It's not my message. It's something that's been talked about for 2,000 years. And you'll see in the film, everyone who watches, this message could literally transform history. It's already been transformed for the worse because this message has been suppressed. So I'm hoping that the true message is released.
I do love the way you're tantalisingly teasing us with what it could be, but the revelation should definitely be saved for the actual film, of course.
Absolutely.
You have a website where people can find more information. I think you've got a new trailer out, have you?
Yeah, we're dropping a new trailer tomorrow, actually, throughout all of our social media. But yes, our website is Christspiracy, not Christ Piracy. A lot of people get it wrong.
Yeah,
Christspiracy.com, and you go to get tickets. And right now in the UK, tickets are selling fast. We've got theaters sold out, basically sold out in Oxford and Milton Keynes, and theaters are selling out fast. And it's one night only, March 20th. So
March 20th.
March 20th here in the UK. Yeah, and it's also for the people in across the pond who are watching by chance. We have the 20th and the 24th on Sunday in America, and the 24th is Palm Sunday, which is the big day that Jesus said what he said that we're going to reveal.
And what kind of reaction are you anticipating?
I hope a really good one. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that are challenged and want to cry heresy and all of these kind of things, but we're just asking questions, and so we hope to just start a conversation. This film really only scratches the surface of this conversation, to be honest, because 90 minutes isn't a long time to go through 5 different religions and dig into this issue, but it does a pretty great job at scratching the surface, and we hope to keep the conversation going.
Great. So Christspiracy, remind us of the website address again.
Christspiracy.com, and you go click Get Tickets.
Fantastic. Cameron Waters, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And next on Free Speech Nation, what is the correct way to use preferred pronouns? Or should you not use them at all? I'm going to be debating that with Cara Dansky and Sarah Phillimore. Don't go anywhere.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
We're always told that there is a huge need for care workers in Britain. We're always told that the salaries just aren't big enough against the benefit system for British people to want to do that work. And there probably is some real truth in that. And yet, if up to 25% of those that come are acting illegally, and it would seem, up until now, that in some areas, foreign care workers come in, but bring in almost the same number of family members with them, that we need to have a proper debate about this. I'm very pleased to be joined by Mike Padgham, chair of the Independent Care Group. If I accept those arguments for a moment, how can it be that the system is so lax that up to 25% are found by the Inspector of Borders and Immigration to be working illegally?
Well, good evening to you, Nigel. It was good to join you. I mean, those figures are shocking to me. When I looked at it today, when I saw that 275 visas that had been issued to a care home that didn't even exist, and a further over 1,000 people joined a company that only had previously 4 staff in it. It makes me wonder the bureaucracy of the Home Office didn't think to check that these companies exist in the first place, because it should be quite straightforward. If people are providing care, they're regulated by the Care Quality Commission. It's a simple phone call to check and double check. Sadly, there seems to have been very many loopholes at the beginning. I believe that's been tightened now, but I can't understand it because all the providers that are doing it in the proper way have to go through quite a rigmarole to actually get approved, and it takes months. So it beggars belief that this has happened and people have been approved for a company that doesn't even exist.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. A slightly contentious issue in the feminist world at the moment is preferred pronouns. When is it correct to use them? Should you use them at all? Should you use them rarely, but allowing for occasional exceptions? And to discuss this, I'm joined by the family law barrister Sarah Phillimore and the author of The Reckoning, How the Democrats and the Left Betrayed Women and Girls, Cara Dansky. Thank you both for joining me. I want to come to you first, Sarah, because you published an article recently in The Critic magazine about a trans-identified judge, and you'd said that you would use the preferred pronouns of that individual, and you received a bit of flack for that. Could you just talk to us a bit about that article and your reasoning?
Yeah, it was an article I thought with a very important point about a judge who behaved in a way that was contrary to the judicial oath, a judge who made public pronouncements which were discriminatory and frankly a bit bonkers, saying gender identity was a biological characteristic. And more importantly for me, a judge who contacted me personally via LinkedIn, using a profile that led no doubt that they were a serving judge. So I wrote an article about that. I thought it was something that was very important. And I had people, after I'd written it, saying, well, I'm not going to read that because it's full of lies. You've lied about the pronouns. What else are you going to lie about? And then someone saying, well, I couldn't read it because it was just so confusing. Even though I had said in the first or second paragraph, this judge is a man. There is only one way to be female. That's to be born female and live to 18. So I'm afraid I just don't accept that someone couldn't get through 900 words without getting totally confused. And I used preferred pronouns because I wanted people to read the article. My audience was not women who know sex is real and it matters. My audience was all those, particularly lawyers, who stayed out of the debate out of fear or apathy. And I felt if I went in, guns blazing, saying he, I reduced the potential audience of that article. I wasn't lying. It just, the reaction really disturbed me.
Well, Cara Dansky, can I bring you in here? What's wrong with what Sarah's saying? Why wouldn't that be a sensible strategic thing to do if you want to get people to read the article?
Yeah, thanks for having me. And Sarah, I did read it, I want you to know. So I understand the point that Sarah's making when she says she was very clear up front that the judge was male and that there's only one way to be female. I get what she's saying. I think, though, that at least in the States, the argument that we need to use so-called preferred pronouns to persuade people is misguided. And I think that because WDI did some polling last fall that showed that in the US, 4 out of 5 voters across the political spectrum understand that the statement, a woman is an adult human female, is true. So we don't need to persuade them of that fact. Almost everybody knows that the emperor has no clothes. And so from my view, what needs to happen now is we need to persuade people to say out loud that the emperor has no clothes. And in my view, using opposite sex pronouns undermines that goal.
Cara, can I just ask you on that, though? What about the situation where you have a close friend who is trans-identified? You're talking in private. This is someone you've known for a long time. You're not talking to a gender ideologue or anything like that, and it's just something that would make them feel more welcome. Even in those circumstances, would you say it's wrong to use those pronouns?
So I am at the point that it's not even possible for me to use an opposite sex pronoun. I couldn't do it if I tried. If I were in the presence, calls herself or himself trans, at a minimum, what I would do is I would be using the person's name when I referred to the person in the third person. But typically, when we're with people, we're not using third person, right? We're interacting and we're using first and second person. So I don't think that situation will arise all that frequently.
Sarah, can I ask you about this? Because some of the reaction that I've seen online from a small handful of feminists who are very, very angry about people, even in exceptional circumstances, using preferred pronouns, is that they've resorted to lies, defamation, just mudslinging, insults. I don't think that's a persuasive tactic. I think a lot of us are open to persuasion, but maybe that isn't the way to go about it. Would you say I'm right about that or wrong?
Well, of course you're right. This isn't a debate about pronouns. I don't care about pronouns. They're not magic. They don't confer sex on anybody. This is about the apparent inability of what I hope is just quite a vicious and vocal minority to accept any disagreement or deviation from their own way of thinking. If we're going to talk strategy, which I'm not a general with an army, I'm an individual, and I will do always and only what I think is the right thing to do. If you are, however, wanting to talk in wider terms of strategy, you need to tell me what is your goal. And the goal of a lot of these people appears to be to remove trans people entirely from public life, which I don't accept as a goal. But once you've clarified your goal, you tell me if this strategy of insulting, defaming and threatening people who disagree with you is a good strategy. I think it's a very poor one. That certainly got me riled up.
Yeah, so Cara, can I ask you about that specifically? I mean, I mentioned on this on a tweet very casually that in the past, when I've been speaking to friends or about close friends, I have used their preferred pronouns, and I got called a misogynist, a grifter, an evil, all kinds of things, and some things I can't even mention on this programme. Is that really the way to go about things? I mean, shouldn't we, as Sarah say, be making our own decisions about these things?
So it's clear that I am not doing that, right? Like, I am here to have a genuine, sincere conversation about strategy. And in terms of the goal, so my goal and the goal of Women's Declaration International globally and in the United States is to protect women and girls as a sex class. And so that's the goal that we are advancing. And in my view, if that is the goal, then it is undermined by the use of opposite sex pronouns. But I'm not coming after either of you or calling you names or yelling at you. I don't agree with that as a strategy. And I will also say, with respect to your article, Sarah, it was very obvious to me that even though you and I have a difference of opinion on the use of opposite sex pronouns, I'm very well aware that you wrote the article that you wrote, having come to your own conclusion. And I know that you know all of the issues. And so I don't want to argue with you about your use of opposite sex pronouns in your article. I'm more interested in a general conversation about the strategy, the most effective strategies for protecting women and girls as a sex class, which in my view includes the eradication of gender identity ideology, which is to say nothing about individuals who claim to identify as the opposite sex or no sex at all, or some mysterious third sex that doesn't exist.
So this is an interesting point, Sarah, is I think a lot of these debates are about to what extent does the language that we use influence what happens in real life. I get very agitated by reporters and journalists calling male criminals she when they're clearly men, and I think that's effectively misleading the public, which is why I never do that. But do you think that these decisions that are made about personal pronoun use have real-world implications that go beyond each individual case?
Oh, of course they do. It depends entirely on context. What the BBC did with Scarlett Blake was wrong. That was a lie. That was deliberately obfuscatory, and I completely understand people's anger about that. What they should have said was, this person is a man who adopted a female identity, the name is, and then we'll use so-and-so pronouns. I mean, the BBC dodged it really effectively, talking about Tiffany Scott, just by using the name Scott. So that's one way of doing it. I completely accept things like journalism, police, recording of crimes. There can be no mucking about. You've got to use the right pronoun for the right sex, because otherwise people can be misled. But I'm talking about people like me who were very clear what I was doing, people who are talking to friends, people they love. The example I give, for example, is if I have a distressed teenage client who wants to be called a certain name or pronoun, I am not in that moment going to start lecturing them about gender politics. I will do what I think is right for my client. Now, I don't think Cara and I have any quarrel at all. We want the same thing. The problem is this pronoun, this ridiculous distraction, has opened up a real fear for me that this inability to debate or to allow any disagreement is not something I naively thought was on one side only. And I've just seen so many ugly and ludicrous examples of people who effectively don't understand what freedom of speech is. Yes, I think clarity in language is important, but you know what's more important is allowing people to use the language they choose. Now, that is the hill I'm going to die on. And if victory is only secured in the gender wars by compelling or crushing the freedom of speech of others, I don't want it. It's not my victory, and you're on your own. I won't be supporting anyone who goes down that road. I'm not saying, of course, that Cara is, but I think for those who are very insistent that pronouns are so important, they do need to have an eye on what some people in their camp are doing, because it's hugely disruptive and actively dangerous. And I think most of them are just enjoying the chance to have a pop at someone. But it's got to be confronted. You have to allow people that freedom, that personal choice. I use the pronouns I think appropriate in the circumstances, but of course I agree journalists need to be clear, and the reporting on Scarlett Blake was not clear. Many people did not know that Scarlett Blake was a man because of the way that was dealt with.
Finally, Cara, just your final word on that, final thought before we wrap up.
Thanks. Yeah, I just think that the extent that this is a political movement to protect girls as a sex class, and in my view I think it's time to move the Overton window, at least in the States. I do my best not to comment on things happening outside our own country. But at this point, it's time to move the Overton window and really encourage people who are just waking up to this, to let them know that it's perfectly fine to call a man a man. And we have had a lot of success in this. We have, for example, persuaded people like Riley Gaines, who started out using opposite sex pronouns. We've persuaded her to stop doing that. We've had a lot of success in the federal legislature, and we've had tremendous success before the federal judiciary by always maintaining adherence to correct sex pronouns. And I just think it's important as a policy matter. It's time. It's time to move the Overton window, and I think we can do it.
Thank you very much. Cara and Sarah, thanks so much for joining me tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
And next on Free Speech Nation, Donald Trump waves to some migrants, visitors to a Willy Wonka experience get less than they bargained for, and a man gets confronted by a stranger for ordering a Happy Meal. It's almost time for social sensations. Don't go anywhere.
From 10 a.m. every Saturday, we want to make you think and we want to make you laugh.
So we will give you all the top stories.
Now we start with a story that has shocked the nation this week.
But we're also going to make it light and fun and bring some entertainment in to make your Saturday morning nice and restful.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight, every night from 11 p.m.
Welcome back to Headliners, and Paul, we're going to get straight into Monday's mail for some good old-fashioned, traditional male breastfeeding.
Yeah. To answer the question, what is the latest woke hell, Josh? Row as hospitals say hormone-filled milk from trans women who were born male is just as good for a baby as the real thing. It's possible for men, if they pump themselves full of estrogen, to grow larger breast tissue, and they often do. If
or you just eat lots of burgers.
Exhibit A. And once you've done that, it is actually then possible to express or lactate a liquid. Okay. If to that liquid you then add another load of pills, medication, chemicals, whatever, that lactation juice can be fed to a baby.
We don't really... This is not for the sake of the baby. The baby has no benefits from this whatsoever. The studies are very weak on it. It's a bit worrying because... You know, when hospitals started indulging in homeopathy and having, the NHS had homeopathic hospitals, that was worrying because they're supposed to be a trusted authority. And before saying something like this, there should be an awful lot of study done.
I want to shame this hospital. This is
whether it's necessary.
University Hospital Sussex NHS Foundation Trust. That's who it is. And they have written one of the stupidest sentences I have read aloud in the 2 years that I've been privileged to do this show. It says, the term human milk is meant to be neutral and not gender biased.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
That's incredible.
Yep.
Oh, my God, we're laughing at you.
I mean, and as someone says here, babies are not props. And that's the scary thing. And when we're not focusing primarily on the health of a baby.
No, but the feeling of a person doing it rather than... It's a bit of an odd way to go, isn't it? So...
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation, and it's time for Social Sensations, which is when we look at what's been going viral this week on the dreaded social media. So the country was gripped this week by Wonka Gate, as dreams turned into a nightmare at a Glasgow Willy Wonka Experience warehouse.
Paid £40 a ticket for this. Smallest bouncy castle in the world, and I bet we have to pay for that food over there. These are like the photo bits there. What a waste of money.
What is that?
Cressida. I thought it was a Banksy installation. Dismal Land again.
It's not an avant-garde art piece, no.
No, it's the children's entertainment option.
Oh.
Apparently it's 35 quid a ticket.
What?
Well, I think they were let down by some suppliers or something, I don't know.
Wow.
Disappointed children thought they were going to Disneyland.
What do you think about that, Lewis?
It's like one of my shows.
Yeah. Lots of people feel disappointed and cheated of their money.
And less sugar than they thought.
Yeah, absolutely. OK, well, and let's have a look at this one. If you ever fancy a Happy Meal, you may want to think twice. According to this lady, it means you have links to Epstein's Island.
What do you think you're doing?
It's none of your business. I'm eating my lunch.
That's a Happy Meal.
Yeah, I'm not very happy now, thank you. What's your point?
Why are you getting a kids' meal?
It's the cheapest thing on the menu, but it's not really any of your business, is it? I'm trying to have my lunch.
Sorry, where are your children? Okay, do you not read the papers online?
Okay, but you can't not read online.
What do you think about this like weird island for these kids? Now suddenly you're telling them about your Happy Meal.
You're talking about Epstein?
Wow. Lewis, I mean, does she have a point?
Well, it is a bit... You know what? She does have a point.
I knew you'd say this.
Because every single one of us have thought about buying a Happy Meal just for ourselves. We want a small little snack. But we don't do it because we're going to be thought... We know that. But then again, to have a woman like that who obviously, she's looking at it, she's saying, why would you ever order something small? I'm maintaining my type 2 diabetes. And I...
Right. Cressida.
That video is a lot like what happens in this studio if you bring in anything with carbohydrate in it. He interrogates you about what you're eating.
Yeah, exactly.
So different topic, but very similar format.
Yeah, which is why you support her in this. That's why, because you are her.
I have been her, and I might be her again if I don't watch my Happy Meal menus.
I don't think there's anything wrong with ordering a Happy Meal, if I'm honest. I haven't done it myself, but... You know, knock yourself out. OK, this is the part of the show where we talk through your unfiltered dilemmas. And our first dilemma came in this week from Craig. Craig says, how do I broach the subject of a threesome with my wife and her friend? Craig, why would you want to do... I mean, look, I'm no relationship counsellor, but that doesn't sound like you're in a good place there.
It's before 9 o'clock, Craig. How do you... I've got no answer. I don't think... Well, I know, have lots of wine and then it will go much more smoothly.
Yeah.
Or what about just don't do it at all? How about that?
I think that's the right answer. Don't do it at all. I remember when I got married for the first time, and I thought to myself, "Wow, my future wife, she like loves me. She'd do anything." Right. And then, you know, later on you realize that's a really bad idea.
I just think...
that no matter how much a woman loves you, and a woman can love, they're the most unbelievably loving, there's a line, but I won't do that.
Yep, that's from the Meatloaf song.
Yeah.
You learn a lot from Meatloaf. Now, our next dilemma comes in from Robert. Robert says, should I stop going to my local pub where folk, including our MP, enjoy challenging conversations, albeit in good humour? Well, I don't see what's wrong with that. Why is that a dilemma, Cressida?
I don't understand. Is he scared of giving his rigorous opinions in public?
Maybe that's what it is. I'm actually finding it hard to decipher that dilemma. But look, I don't control what people email in. What's wrong with going to a pub where an MP is having a chat?
Because people maybe are recording it. They're going to record the MP.
Maybe.
And you'll be... you know, you can't say anything anymore. I know how... You can. You say whatever the hell you like, don't you? I do, and I get cancelled.
Yeah, when you had your show cancelled, I wish you had more of a filter.
Yeah.
I'm siding with the cancellers on this.
Okay.
I think you need to be stopped, Lewis Schaefer. Anyway, look, thank you ever so much for joining us for Free Speech Nation. This was the week when the BBC said you can't state biological facts, a Willy Wonka experience reduced children to tears, and the nation celebrated as, after years of trying his best, Lewis Schaefer finally got cancelled. But thank you to my panel, Lewis and Cressida Wetton, and also to all of my brilliant guests this evening. And by the way, if you want to join us live in the studio and be part of our audience, just go to www.sroaudiences.com. Don't go anywhere, because it's time for Mark Dolan tonight, and join me again next week for Free Speech Nation. Farewell.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather. It's quite a cold night tonight, some frost and dense fog patches once more. And then all eyes to the west as the next area of low pressure moves in, but it's going to take its time. Western areas seeing outbreaks of rain through Monday, northern and eastern areas holding on to dry weather until later. This evening, though, skies are clearing and temperatures are starting to fall away overnight. We'll see quite a widespread frost developing. Where winds are light, we'll see some mist and fog patches forming. Freezing fog patches as temperatures fall below freezing in the countryside. So there could be some tricky travelling conditions first thing, particularly across central southern parts of the UK. Further west, however, the winds start to increase, outbreaks of rain start to push in, and then this slowly moves north and eastwards through the day on Monday. Some heavier bursts in there possible, though parts of Scotland, northern and eastern parts of England will stay dry for much of the day. Plenty of sunny spells here, and the winds coming in from the south, temperatures lifting a little higher than the weekend, highs around 12 Celsius in the best of any brighter weather in the south. Then into Tuesday, weather systems start to clear away. We're left with a legacy of showers across some western areas, but there'll be plenty of sunny spells through the day. One or two of the showers could be on the heavy side. The next few days, it largely remains dry. There'll be some bright or sunny spells at times, temperatures above average.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday from 8 p.m.
You're now in exile. I imagine it wouldn't be safe for you to go back to Russia. Can I ask you if you feel safe personally, and what do you think can be done to remove Putin, or is he going to be there for as long as he wants?
I think that is, of course, fundamental question. It is there should be pressure inside Russia and outside. Inside Russia right now, it's impossible because Putin put all leaders in jail and some of us just abroad. You know, just two were already killed. Mr. Nemtsov, Boris Nemtsov, my friend, my collaborator on my party, was killed on the walls on Kremlin. Alexei Navalny was killed in jail and in the camp. And that is, the people live in fear to identify themselves as protesters, to identify themselves as against Putin's regime, etc. That's why today there is no chance for opposition to rise inside Russia. But outside, of course, this war against Ukraine, that is the fundamental issue for all foreign leaders. And in fact, just support of Ukraine and not to let Putin to destroy Ukraine, to defeat Ukraine. That is an important issue because just Ukraine, that's not just in Ukraine, war in Ukraine. Ukraine just fighting for their territorial integrity, but fighting for the whole European countries because after Ukraine, other countries could appear, other subject of aggression could be, and Putin easily could try to test Article 5 of NATO Charter. It could be one of the small countries of Baltic states.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From 10 a.m. every Saturday, we want to make you think and we want to make you laugh.
So we will give you all the top stories.
Now we start with a story that has shocked the nation this week.
But we're also going to make it light and fun and bring some entertainment in to make your Saturday morning nice and restful.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 9 o'clock on television, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and across the world. This is Mark Dolan Tonight. In My Big Opinion, the Prime Minister has made a bold speech calling out the